You're listening to the Jan Price Show, all about movies. And today, my guest is writer-director Michael Maren. And we're going to be talking about his new film entitled A Little White Lie that stars Michael Shannon, Kate Hudson, Don Johnson, and many other wonderful actors. It's a fun film, Michael. I'm looking forward to taking a deep dive into this movie. So welcome to the
Oh,
show.
great. Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
You're welcome. Let's talk about you wrote this. So where did the concept for A Little White Lie, how did it come about? And also let our audience know a little bit of what the storyline is so they know what we're talking about.
The storyline is that there's a university, not a very good university, that's kind of down on its luck. They used to have a writers' festival every year that would bring in like big name writers, and they name drop a couple of them, John Updike and whatnot. And but writers' festivals have gotten very popular. I mean, a lot of schools have them now, so they can't attract any big names. And the president of the school says, we can't afford to do this unless you can like bring in a really big writer. And there's this really big writer named Shriver who 20 years earlier had published this massive book that everybody bought, but did not necessarily read. We know those books.
Yes.
And then he disappeared from the scene, and no one knows where he is or whatever happened to him. And Kate Hudson plays the chairperson of the festival, and she thinks she's figured out where he is, and she sends him an invitation to deliver the keynote address at the festival. Unfortunately, the letter goes to somebody who's never read a book in his life, isn't very much interested in things. But he accepts the invitation everywhere anyway. That's Michael Shannon. And he shows up at this festival. And then, of course, it's Kate Hudson. So he kind of feels a responsibility to not screw things up. And we don't want him to get caught.
No, it's a well, obviously everybody's, I'm sure, and I think you even allude to this in the film too, is a JD Salinger character after he kind of disappeared also. So where'd you get the inspiration for this?
Well, it actually comes from a book called Shriver. That's the title of the book. I hadn't heard of the book, but I walked into I go to bookstores. That's my thing. If I land in any city, any town, anywhere, the first thing I do is I check out the bookstores. And so I was in Lenox, Massachusetts, which is a very small town, and there's a bookstore there called The Bookstore. And Chris Belden was reading from this novel, Shriver. And he read the first chapter, and I thought it was really intriguing. That sets up the whole concept. The part about the school and some of that I added to it, obviously, but the concept is there about the mistaken identity. And I thought, I just wrapped a film that I directed called A Short History of Decay. And I thought, wow, this would be really interesting. So I bought a copy of the book at the cash register, got in the line with everybody else to get the book signed. And I laid it down there and I said, I'm going to make a movie out of this. Sign away the rights. Instead of signing just your name, sign the rights in the title page of the book. And I gave him $1. And that's how it started. Obviously, we there were lawyers involved after that, and things got put away properly. But that's really how it started. And that was a long time ago. It took a long time to get the movie made for more reasons than I can go into very quickly.
So, okay, so what was it about the book right away? Because you only heard him read a little bit of the book at that point and not had read the whole book, but you already decided you were going to do a movie. So what was it that in that reading or that sparked you to think this will be a good movie and this is something I want to do? Because you hadn't done many movies up to that point.
I've written a lot of movies at that point, but I'd only directed one at that point. And it was actually, I had recently wrapped my first film, and I was kind of thinking about, well, what do I want to do next? Now, what I would like to do next is a massive epic set in Northeast Africa in 1910 that would probably cost $50 million to $100 million to make. But I'm a realist. And I was attracted to the books. It has a very subtle, droll sense of humor. It's not it's not just laugh out loud, roll around in the aisles, but it's where my sense of humor lies in things that I think are subtle and amusing more than and so but also thematically the book is more than just an imposter pretending to be a writer. It's really about identity. When do you call yourself a writer? Who is a writer? And the idea of the idea of imposter syndrome, I guess, and I hate that term because it gets thrown around quite a bit nowadays and all of that. But I think it's probably something more akin to a mental breakdown where people get divorced from their own identities. I mean, I think the book has. I actually ran my original script by a couple of psychiatrists to make sure I had it right.
And they thought you did, obviously.
Yeah, I made a few changes based on that, but yes. Yeah, it's what it is. Dissociative behavior, I believe, is the psychiatric term for what we're talking about here. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that it's a situation that I think a lot of people relate to. I think it's why Michael Shannon wanted to play the role. I think a lot of actors related to the idea of imposter syndrome, and I did too. I think that I remember I published my first book in 1997, and I remember going and speaking in front of a large audience for the first time, and then feeling like I wasn't the one standing on the stage. I was sitting in the audience looking at that guy and saying, like, who is he? What is that identity? That was I suddenly a writer? Was I suddenly a public speaker? I don't know. And believe me, when I was first behind the camera and Kate Hudson was there and Michael Shannon was there, and I was directing this movie and was about to call action for the first time, I was there like, that's not me. that's a movie director. That's Cecil B. DeMille, but that's not me. My father used to insult me by calling me Cecil B. DeMille, but that's a whole other story.
But this is only the second film that you directed, correct?
Yes, it is.
Okay,
Yeah.
so, and there was a period, how many years in between the first and the
It
second?
was 10 years.
10 years. Okay.
Yeah.
Go
Well,
ahead.
not 10 years between directing. I think it was 8 years. We started shooting this film in 2020. But I need to back it up a little bit. We were ready to shoot at the end of 2018. And Michael was attached, and I had a window, and we had prepped the film in Savannah, Georgia, and there was a holdup in it. And during the producers thing, finances, that stuff that's the normal movie junk.
Mhm.
And during that period, I was diagnosed with cancer, and a fairly serious cancer, and I lost a year to chemo and surgeries and a lot of other stuff. One of the things that I'm always somewhat thankful for is if we had gone ahead, if the film had been, if we had started actual production on the film at the beginning of 2019, I wouldn't have quit. I wouldn't have noticed I would have just ignored the symptoms. I very likely would have died.
You're okay now.
So
You're all
I
okay now.
Yeah, I mean, so that's one of those things you kind of look back at and go like, okay, well, that worked out okay.
That was a blessing. Yes.
Yeah. So we started, but it took me a year to be ready to work again. I lost an entire year. And so we started prepping the film at the beginning of at the end of 2019, the beginning of 2020. And we started filming it in February of 2020. And a couple of weeks later, with 8 days left to shoot, COVID closed us down. And it took 400 days want to bring to clear COVID for people to kind of start making films again, and then when that was starting to happen, we had to get this cast back together. It was a very large cast,
Right.
and so we had to find time, and we also, and some of the actors, a lot of them were already working because bigger productions. Zach Braff was doing something at Disney, and Disney had the money and the time to shoot on a soundstage and to isolate people and all of that. We're a small independent film, really, and so that we couldn't move everybody to an island and fly everybody there in the crew and isolate everybody. So we had to wait until we could do a little bit longer, and then we had to get everybody. Find a time where we could get everybody there. We didn't get everybody there. I had to rewrite scenes on the fly because actors couldn't make it, or one of our actors was stuck in Canada, and stuff like that, and got there. I'd wanted her for like 3 days, and she got there at the very last day, so I could use her in one scene, but another scene. So we had to go through all of that. And one of the key actors was also pregnant at the time, and definitely couldn't be in the film. So I shot with a body double, and 3 months later, when she had a baby and was back to looking the way she did earlier, we shot her against a green screen and plopped her into the film.
Wow. Wow.
So it took a long time. The whole thing took a really long time.
It sounds like there should be a movie about the making of this movie.
I may write a book about their making
Yeah.
of the movie, but yeah,
Lots of trials and tribulations to get through, for sure, but you persevered, and it's a wonderful film. I mean, it's really, I mean, you've got this great cast. I love Michael Shannon. I just finished watching George and Tammy on
oh yeah.
Showtime, and I thought he was absolutely wonderful in that role, as well as Jessica Chastain, who's always brilliant in whatever she does. But Michael is also, and then the wonderful Kate Hudson and Don Johnson. Great cast. So how did you attract this wonderful cast? And even you started shooting and stopped shooting and all of that, but how did that all come about?
Well, there were different people attached at different times. When I mean, it even I didn't even tell you the whole story,
Yeah.
but I think when Michael read the script, as someone gave it to him, and he wanted to meet me, and I went from New York to Chicago, and we met, and he. I eventually he signed on to do it, and I think actors want to work with Mike.
Mhm.
And look, I'm not, if I was an egomaniac or a liar, I would say no. They all saw my first film, and everybody really wanted to work with me. That's not true. But I had Mike, and Mike stayed with all through the cancer and all of that. He was the one constant, and so we were able to put this cast together fairly quickly in order to make it all happen. And yeah, but it was Michael Shannon, and I think Michael really understood the character. I mean, I think he related to the character in a lot of ways. I think I may be imagining this, but I think he actually told me that once. And it's very different than you've ever seen him do anything. Do anything. It's very restrained and very and very subtle. Michael's got amazing comic timing. He knew how to deliver that. And yeah, I think it's a Michael Shannon you haven't seen before.
Yes, it is a Michael Shannon we haven't seen before, but he's always wonderful in everything that he does. I've never seen a bad performance from him in anything. So uh, to get an actor of his caliber attached to your second directing film, it is pretty amazing. So, and you've come at this later in life. I also have come to what I do later in life. So I always appreciate people who, we've had other careers and we've done other things, and then we kind of follow our heart and our passion to wherever it leads us. And it's led me to this. For you, how did you make the transition? Because you were a writer, you wrote for a lot of publications. You were in Africa for a long time. Africa is one of my heart spaces, a place that I just love. And yet when you came back, you wrote a book, I think, about your transitioning back, being in the States after being in Africa. For how many years were you there?
I was there on and off for about 17 years. I mean, I did a 5-year stretch once without ever coming back to the US. And then I kind of bounced up. I had a place in Nairobi, Kenya, and I had a place in New York. And I was kind of commuting by British Airways mostly, back and forth. But I was in Africa more time than I wasn't. But it actually, interesting. It starts earlier than that, really. I got here only because I've never had a plan. I've always done, for better or for worse. And I think I'm of that generation where, I didn't get out of college thinking, oh my God, I have to get a job. I have to get money. I need to be a banker. I need to get a master's in business administration. I need to, it was like, no, I didn't want to do any of that crap. So I joined the Peace Corps after college, which brought me to Africa originally. And then I worked, and I wanted to stay, and I did some aid work, and I wanted to stay, and I worked for the U.S. government in Somalia way back when, before any of the current problems started. But I didn't like what was going on there, and I quit, and I started writing. And I kind of always wanted to be a writer, and I started working as a journalist. And working in East Africa. I went to Uganda when Idi Amin was overthrown. I did a lot of the kind of crazy ass stuff that you got to be young and stupid to do.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was in Somalia during the worst of the fighting, and during a time when a lot of journalists were murdered there, and I was kind of about to turn 40 at that time, and decided that maybe I've had enough, and I came back, got married, and started. And I wrote a book about Somalia, is what I did then, and that book was optioned for film, and I was lucky enough to get hired to write the script, and that kind of got me going down the movie hole. And I wrote a bunch of scripts and sold a bunch of scripts over the years. But I think anybody who pays attention to the business or listens to screenwriters complaining knows that selling scripts is not the same thing as getting movies made. You can get paid really well and make enough money to raise to pay your mortgage or whatever, but it was really unsatisfying to me. And I was with a producer once and we were talking about one of my scripts, to which there'd been some big name directors attached. It was a script I'd written called Moving Violations, and several directors have been attached, and then time goes on, and then some other bright shiny object catches their attention, and he said to me, "Why don't you just direct it yourself?" And I said, "No, I don't know how to direct a film. What do I know about directing a film?" And he said, "You can do it. You've been on film sets. You've written scripts. You've directed it in your head. Just direct it." I didn't direct that film, but I did write A Short History of Decay, which I very purposely wrote as a film that small cast that could be shot in a couple of locations for very little money. And that came out in 2014. And the film got some really good notices, and it was the Brian Greenberg and Linda Lavin and Harris Yulin. And then I kind of went off on this one, and I've got a bunch of other projects. I mean, I've since done some script work and done some studio work and stuff like that, script, rewrites and things like that. But it took a long time to get this movie off the ground. There were a couple of times I thought, we were ready to go, and then, for whatever reason, things don't happen.
Do you has that changed how you feel about directing and doing this now, because it was such a long, arduous process for this particular movie, or are you more energized than ever to get behind the camera again?
No, I really want to get behind the camera again. I want to do it soon. I think this happens to every director. You direct a film, and then you start watching. You watch all the work, and when you preparation to start the editing process, and there's a sense of I wish I'd done that. Or I should have used another shot here. I should have asked to talk to the actors about trying something. So your head just gets. You have to make decisions constantly. The thing I always go back to is Truffaut's film Day for Night, where he's the director and he's walking around and he's got a problem, but people keep coming up to him. Should I put the actress in this dress or this dress? That one. You're constantly making decisions like that. Bang, 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 because you have to. And then later on, you kind of go, yeah, I should have done the other thing. Or so I have a whole list of things that that I'll do better next time. I mean, I direct a film, and so I want to get behind the camera again and have a chance to make up for all my mistakes.
Well, other than all of the issues and problems that you had putting this, what was it like? I mean, this is your second film you're directing, and you've got Michael Shannon and Kate Hudson and Don Johnson and Zach Braff, and I mean, a great cast. What was that like for you? Did that feel daunting for you? I mean, you had a lot of other issues and things going on into this, but I mean, like, I'm directing Michael Shannon. I've only directed one other film. How did you feel about that?
It was scary. It was scary, and I was afraid. Look, Kate Hudson spent more time on movie sets than, I could live on a movie set for the rest of my life, and she will have spent more time on movie sets.
Right.
She's been doing it since she was a child. Don Johnson also since he was a kid. Don, I don't know, he's made 300 movies or something like that, or TV, and you add all of that up. And it was actually, I'll tell you a story. And this was there was a scene we were trying to blocking, tell where the act, so we know this actor's going to work there, stop there, move over here, camera's going to come around this way. And we were doing it in a really small space. And I just in the moment, I was having a hard time figuring it out. And part of it was because we were moving so quickly, and I didn't have time to storyboard the whole film at this point. And Don said, "You know what? I think this is what we should do." And I was there. Yeah, you're right. So we did it Don's way. And I think it was a Friday afternoon. And Saturday morning, he called me and said, "Meet me for lunch." We weren't working the weekend. And he called me up, and he was just really apologized. He said, "I shouldn't have done that in front of the cast. I should have taken you aside." And I said to him, "Don, I got no ego tied up in this. I defer to your experience or Kate's experience, in if I'm doing something wrong, I want to hear it. You know, you've made all these films. I have a vision for the way this film is. And if you can do something to help me execute that, then I'm very, very open to any suggestions you might make. You know, and that was it. I mean, but I did rely on the actors at sometimes to figure stuff out.
Right.
And then I you know, I watched and took notes.
Yeah. Well, it is a highly entertaining film. I mean, it keeps you guessing, and I like that, you know, and it's just it's fun, it's interesting, it's got lots of intrigue in it and great cast, and I just wish you much success with The Little White Lie. Where can people see this film, Michael?
Well, right now it's playing theaters, but I think mostly it's gonna go to VOD. If you have Apple right now and you type in Little White Lie, it'll pop up and you can buy it or rent it. It'll be available tomorrow or probably at midnight tonight. So I think VOD is probably the way to go unless you live in. Oh, there's a list of it's playing in Chicago, it's playing in Minneapolis, it's playing in New York. It's playing in Phoenix, in
People
Los
can find it.
Angeles.
It's all over. Well, I wish you
It's
much.
around right now, yeah, but
It's
it's probably only
around.
going to play for
And
a
it's
couple of
highly
weeks.
worth going to see, everyone. Highly worth renting it if it's on VOD. And certainly if you can find it in a theater near you, I highly recommend it. It's a fun film. It's a great, you know, great cast. It keeps you guessing. It's a really good story. It truly is a good story. Well, Michael, thank you so much for being on the show, and I wish you much success.
Thank you, Jan. Great talking to you.
You too. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.